Bhagavato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I think this is the 9th session of our investigation of the discourse on developing mindfulness. We've already covered quite a bit of ground, and now we've arrived at the 7 factors of awakening, one of the themes of the Dhammas. And this theme is a little bit specialized. Maybe for some people it's quite new. Anybody not heard of 7 factors of awakening? Oh, we have an advanced class here. Oh. Well, then I guess that's enough, huh? You already know about it. But I would say that these 7 factors of awakening are especially useful for moderately advanced meditators. I'm going to say advanced, but it might go to your heads. Moderately advanced. There is no mention of morality, no mention of even right view in the 7 factors. So already presupposes you've already had that well established. And in this particular context, it's within the development of mindfulness. So which is already developing a meditative exercise of mindfulness. And so we, as we follow through these various themes, there's certain patterns arise. First of all, to be aware of the particular theme. And in this case, it says to be aware of when that particular theme is present, when it's not present, what's the arising of it, and what's the fulfillment of it by development. Some of these themes, like the hindrances they mention about, the arising factors and the ceasing factors. But this one here doesn't mention about ceasing, only development, only progress. Because they're factors of awakening, right? not hindrances. So in Pali, this is the Bojjhangas. Maybe you recognize it from one of the chants we do sometimes. And there's 7 of them. 7 is more like, I don't know why the Buddha chose 7. It's a very auspicious number, I guess. And some of them you already perhaps recognize from other categories. Of course, mindfulness and energy, concentration. But there's also some new ones there, some surprises. Like investigation of Dhamma. Haven't come across that before, have you? Joy, that's mentioned with jhanas, with concentration sometimes. Tranquility, also mentioned with concentration sometimes. But these factors, when they're all brought together, the Buddha realizes that they are very, very skillful supports for awakening, presupposing morality, the basis of morality and right understanding, of course. So mindfulness, the first one, there's also it's like a progression too, because the very first one, mindfulness, is the basis. And then what mindfulness is aware of, then Dhamma, investigation of Dhamma then proceeds. You investigate what mindfulness exposes, in other words. So it's very, very relevant. For some things in mindfulness, we're aware of certain things, certain feelings, certain states of mind, and they just pass away. But if some aspect of your experience persists, it may benefit from some investigation, deeper investigation. And this investigation is not just thinking about, it's not just analytical. It's technically defined as one examines with wisdom, investigates thoroughly, and tests it all around. Remember that? In your readings? It should be in that the collection of passages I gave. Samyutta Nikaya 5, page 68. Anyway, now you got it. In case you just glossed over it before. But so this is a special kind of investigation. So you're based upon mindfulness. And in our Thai tradition, in forest tradition, they talk about sati panya, means mindfulness and wisdom. So wisdom is not something that, in that case, comes out of a book or just something you read about or think about, but it comes out as a result of mindfulness. That's clearly seeing. And as if you recall, the instructions about developing mindfulness, one clearly comprehending, clearly seeing. It's a non-judgmental awareness. It's direct observation, directly seeing, not conceptualizing. So when that exposes some aspect of our experience, body, feelings, states of mind, or these particular states of mind, if you like, the Dhammas, then maybe it is worth some further investigation then. And different ways that one can investigate. This is now this is not the Pali Canon, this is my interpretation now. So in brackets and quotation marks. 3 different ways you can do it. Well, many ways, but 3 particular ways I would suggest you could try out. One is what I call seeding the mind. That is, you bring up whatever this particular theme is. Say your mindfulness exposes some state of mind. Some kind of, what's something, maybe something relevant, some particular kind of anger or something. And most people, of course, they just don't want to see it. But mindfulness tells you it's there, anger. And now we investigate where does it arise from, and what causes it to cease, hopefully. But investigating where it arises from sometimes is not so easy. We already are a bit disturbed by seeing that kind of unpleasant emotion in the mind. So we already have built up a resistance to it, kind of defensiveness, if you like. But if you just seed that experience in your mind, okay, there's anger there. Okay, don't get too involved with it. Don't get too worried or frustrated or anxious about it. Just, okay, anger. What is anger? And just bring that inquiry up in your mind. Seed the mind with that investigation. A little bit of curiosity. What is this anger anyway? This is based upon one of Ajahn Chah's principles. He said, the deeper the calm, the deeper the insight. So sometimes you experience some state of mind like that, and you aren't able to take it any further because your mind isn't calm enough. There's another, I think it was Carl Jung said something like, you can't resolve an issue of the same level of consciousness. So with meditation, with concentration, you can change your level of consciousness. You can deepen your consciousness to see it from a different angle. But you won't be able to do that if you're just facing it head on, you see. So you just kind of seed that thought in your mind. What is anger anyway? And maybe sleep on it. Not in meditation, but when the occasion arises. And maybe in your dream, you might have an insight or something. Because when you're dreaming, your mind is in a different state of consciousness. But ideally you do it in meditation. Just by calming the mind, the mind calms down. The usual discursive investigation, maybe a certain amount of defensiveness falls away, and you can see it in a new light. And be a little bit more objectively rather than subjectively. Not my anger, it's just a state of mind. Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's not mine. A little safer, isn't it? If it's mine, I got a problem. I got to solve it. So sometimes that works, just to bring it up in your mind. To keep that in your mind, bring it to consciousness occasionally. Right, anger, right. It's something if it's sort of something unpleasant, very easy just to forget about it. I told you the story of on the ski track, this experience of getting angry with somebody. Fortunately, it was the middle of a winter retreat, so I couldn't really escape. Other times maybe there's a certain issue I was investigating, but then I had to do something. On one occasion, there was some very interesting experience I was investigating, and I had to go off and do a wedding blessing or something profound, So for them it wasn't for me. And I just couldn't follow it up, you see. I couldn't follow the investigation deeper and deeper. Just so I had to remember the chanting, you see. So I had to put it in the back of my mind, and I forgot about it. Another one is what I call disengaging. Some of these experiences, maybe we have quite a bit of a reaction to them. Maybe like anger, maybe we have quite a bit kind of a surprise or reaction to it. Well, now just try to step back. Like I mentioned, it's just a state of mind. Or another way to keep connected with it, but not be directly engaged. Just look at the sensations in the body. How does this express itself in the body? So you keep a connection with it by the bodily sensations, but it's not really overpowering for you. What is the sensation of anger in your body? And that can be quite interesting. Investigate it. And the other one this is a little bit more tricky, this is a bit controversial, is to engage with some of these issues. Like with something like anger, for example, I could say a little bit tricky here. You got to be a little bit creative and a little bit careful. But if it's something like an unpleasant feeling, a state of mind, and you can't seem to investigate very thoroughly, then try to engage with it. Try to kind of play it out. Try maybe to accentuate it. Just sit in front of the mirror and show your angry face. Does it really feel like to be angry? What does it look like to be angry? Mostly we don't look in the mirror and we're angry, do we? Huh? Who wants to see your ugly face? Not even you. Or engage with it a little bit more, kind of a little bit more distant, maybe. It's just to talk with it. What have you got to tell me? What's the other side of this? What am I missing in this picture? Allow it to have a dialogue with it. Time for a story. I can give you a personal example of this because I'm going to make it short here. I've got 45 minutes. But anyway, I was on a retreat with Ajahn Tiradhammo up in the mountains in Spain. And I was sitting meditation, beginning of retreat, and I was just always dozing off. And even in walking meditation, I was just a big kind of black cloud in my head. And I thought, well, I am high in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Maybe it's, not enough oxygen up here. Everybody else was fine. Maybe it was jet lag. I just flew from London to Spain, That's a joke too. But I had to find some excuse. It wasn't my problem. It was supposed to do something physical, something physical. But after a while, I tried all kinds of things to try and get out of this. And then this one day I was just walking meditation, and what's this about anyway? What's going on here? And suddenly I saw this big black cloud in my head. I could kind of visualize it. A big black cloud in the head. What are you doing there? And then just poof. And it was just, hey, the sun's shining. And then I realized what it was. I was at that time I was a second monk in a monastery in England. And the second monk, the first monk gets all the glory. The second monk gets all the glory. We have to handle all the problems, you see. So, and I took this quite seriously. So even though I was up in the mountains in Spain, I was still worrying about the monastery back in England. It was absolutely absurd. Because here I was up in the retreat center, no telephone, couldn't even write a letter to them. I couldn't contact them. Here I am worrying about them. Absolutely absurd. I just had to laugh at myself. But then I realized this was caused by my responsibility demon sitting right on my shoulder here. Responsibility demon, it's cracking his whip. So then I have a dialogue with it. What are you after anyway? This is ridiculous. Okay. I'm not being irresponsible by not phoning them up every 5 minutes and asking how things are going. So gradually, talking to this responsibility demon, so we're near the end of the retreat, isn't it? I don't talk to it all the time. I'm not talking to myself all the time. But it's sort of say personalize, if you like, some of these issues, then you can have a dialogue. It's part of you anyway, isn't it? It's part of you. There isn't actually a little gremlin sitting here on my shoulder, is there? It's all in my mind, you see. So it's part of my mind, you see. But sometimes we don't want to talk to it, or it's in the unconscious. So it's just it's kind of controlling us, but we don't want to see it. But recognizing, okay, responsibility, and then now it's not a demon anymore. It's a kind of a responsibility can be a positive thing. It can also drive you crazy. Not handled carefully, not dialogue with, or not understood carefully. Really terrorize your life. But being able to talk with it, okay, still there, I think. We haven't talked for a long time. I haven't got much responsibilities here, even though I'm a co-abbot. Just in name only, not in work. So the third one, we get mindfulness, investigation of what mindfulness reveals. It's investigation of Dhamma. And then there is energy. If you investigate correctly or sufficiently enough, then you get a little bit of an aha experience. Oh, that's it. I'm seeing it clearly, more clearly. And then some energy will arise. This is more like spiritual energy. It also requires some energy to investigate properly, so kind of there's a feedback loop there. See? Some people think, they've learned a little bit about meditation. They think, oh, mindfulness is all I need. Not enough. Mindfulness, investigation of Dhamma, and then from that, energy can arise, and you get a new lease on life, a new approach to your practice, and then that can bring up joy. The fourth one. This is a translation. My translation of the Pali word piti, usually translated as rapture, but to me, rapture is a little bit too exotic. We aren't meditating to get rapturous. We aren't in the rapture. We're a different sect. We're just in the joy sect. And where this piti is mostly mentioned is in reference to concentration. It's referred to often in the development of jhana or deep absorptions. But it also occurs with insight meditation. There's mention of having a more clearly seeing things, and you get a certain amount of energy rising in your energy, and this sense of a fullness of your heart. And in Thai, it's translated as im jai, right? That means your heart is full. It's fullness of heart. So it's not just the momentary happiness, but it's a real effulgence of positive emotion. Something like that. You know what joy is, don't you? Yeah. Hard to put in words. But opening your Christmas presents. I don't know what your experience is, but and in the teachings about concentration, they say when you experience this piti in absorption, deeper levels of concentration. You should try to develop this and infuse the whole body with it, so that all the cells in your body are just vibrating with this joy, this rapture, you see. And if you know a little bit about, as I mentioned, with the feelings, pleasant feeling, there's pleasant feeling, you get more energy, the mind is more open and relaxed. This supports concentration. It supports investigation also. When the mind is more open, not constricted or restricted or suppressed, the mind is more spacious then. So positive emotion, positive feeling tone, pleasant feeling, and joy, they're very powerful emotional factors to also support concentration and mindfulness as well. So joy gives rise to tranquility. And there's various kinds of joy, right? I mean, there's for many people, joy is something which is usually very, very exciting and exuberant, and they feel very joyful. They go dancing around, you see. But in spiritual practice, if you do that, that joy can be dissipated. That energy will dissipate it. And it is obviously dependent upon the sensory stimulation, where the real joy comes more internally, spiritual realization from deeper insight. So that it follows on from joy, tranquility then. And tranquility, also now we're getting more refined, because the next three of these are more passive qualities. Mindfulness, and then the next three are quite active. Investigation of Dhamma, energy and joy, very energetic. Then it shifts now to the more tranquilizing ones: tranquility, concentration, equanimity. So this is beginning to contain that energy now. And, you have to be very careful about tranquility, because I think a lot of people learn about meditation usually in the attempt to tranquilize themselves. Huh? I thought sometimes meditation is taught in the context of reducing stress, relaxing, chilling out, right? That's how it's sold. Huh? If the Buddhists talk about meditation as, investigating suffering, don't have a big crowd, But if I was to go to a talk and say, oh, meditation, relax and feel blissful and chill out, then, oh yeah, I want that. Yeah, I'll pay a lot for that. But investigating suffering, no thanks. You can't even pay me to do that. So sometimes this tranquility, unfortunately, can become a form of suppression. For a lot of people, they recognize more often the benefits of tranquility, but in opposition to its opposite, you see, of being scattered, of being restless, of being anxious, or whatever. So they try to realize tranquility by suppressing the other negative aspects of the practice. But if you see, this follows on from joy and energy and investigation of Dhamma, then you have different concept of tranquility. This is tranquility of aha. That's the way it is. Yes, now I see clearly. You don't have to go chasing after things. Your mind is clear enough and calm enough that you can see this is the way things really are. And one of the ways that can be supported and maybe also experienced to a certain degree, it's the whole basis of what the Buddha calls guarding the doors of the senses. Many times, like, for example, on a meditation retreat, people come to a meditation retreat, and after a few days on the retreat, they may notice a certain degree of tranquility of body and mind. And they think, oh, yeah, I had a great concentration. Most of the time, I would say the mind is tranquil just because of sensory deprivation. You cut down the sensory impingements. You've been many hours with your eyes closed, not speaking, a retreat. Just cutting down all the sensory stimulation, the mind naturally calms down. and we experience some degree of tranquility. The trouble is, it's very temporary, isn't it? As soon as you go back to your ordinary sense impressions again, it's gone. But at least you have a taste of the possibility of tranquility then. From sense restraint, the Buddha encourages development of concentration, exercise in focusing attention on a meditation object. And this is a very simple, you can say even a psychological exercise, because if you keep your attention focused on one thing consistently, the mind calms down. The mind centers around one thing. Rather than processing many different things, usually you aren't even conscious of it maybe, but right now we're processing many things going on. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought. But you close your eyes, you focus on the breathing in a quiet place, cut down eye input, ear input. So hopefully you aren't eating anything. Pleasant smell of incense. Hopefully your body's reasonably comfortable, and then you just have to work with the mind, you see. So cutting down some of that sensory impressions, the mind begins to settle. And if you don't get distracted by the sensory impressions that arise, discomfort in the body, wandering thoughts, back to the breathing, back to the breathing, back to the breathing, the mind begins to settle on that object, and one object, and become familiar with it. So we come to the next theme, is concentration. Well, maybe I should mention a couple of other supportive qualities of tranquility, mentioned in the scriptures often: seclusion, dispassion, and cessation. Seclusion, different kinds of seclusion. Again, it is a bit like, initially like sensory deprivation, removing yourself from busy situations. Dispassion is more a mental state, removing yourself from the passions. You can say directing your attention away from the passions, greed, aversion, delusion. And then cessation, to emphasize the cessation aspect of phenomena rather than the arising of them. Things are ceasing all the time. If you when you sit down, maybe in the beginning your heart rate is quite high, and you sit down, slowly the heart rate slows down. And the body is slowing down. Maybe you aren't old enough to notice it now, but wait a few years. Slowing down, become concrete. From tranquility, you arrive at concentration. And this is a little bit of can be a very complex topic, because there are quite a few different opinions about concentration. Basically, there are two major schools. There is a school which is, you can say, the Pali Canon school, and then there is a school from the commentaries, the Visuddhimagga. So the Pali Canon school refers to some concentration, especially absorption, in sort of a much more, I wouldn't say casual, but it's not such a formalized way. Anybody can experience moments of concentration. Whereas in the Visuddhimagga, the commentaries, they explain concentration is a very advanced state. Keep focusing and focusing, and then you enter absorption. No more sense impressions. No sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. Maybe at one point even the breathing stops. And then to be able to do vipassana meditation, insight meditation, one has to come out of that state, because your mind is really, really calm. Whereas in the type of absorption explained in the Pali Canon, it wasn't so extreme. Like some of the people were enlightened, by listening to the discourse of the Buddha. They weren't in this kind of jhana. They always had their ears open, they're listening, but they're really focused on what the Buddha was saying. They're absorbed in what the Buddha was saying. So like Ajahn Liam, the abbot of Wat Pah Pong, he said that he's quoted as saying, I don't know if it's right or not, but he's quoted as saying, that somebody can enter into absorption by sweeping leaves. They can be so collected on sweeping leaves. So they haven't got their eyes closed. They have sense impressions, but they're so focused. They're in a very, very deeply concentrated state, but it's still, you can say, awake, which I find, be more realistic rather than drop into a trance state. And the problem with the definition of Visuddhimagga is it's, besides it being very sort of extreme or advanced, whatever, extreme anyway, it's very, can be very difficult, as it were, to develop insight meditation then. Very easy to drop into these trance states. Well, not easy, but if you drop into the trance state, it's not so easy to come out of it. So there's different discussions, different opinions, even heated discussions about what jhana is, absorption. Monks don't argue, they just have heated discussions. But I prefer Ajahn Chah's definition. He just said, rather than worry about the different levels, there's mention of 4 different levels of absorption in the Pali Canon. He said, rather than worry about these 4 different levels, what they are and whatever, he said, just refer to them as different levels of calm. Rather than think when you're meditating, your mind gets calm. This is second jhana. I've got there. There's many different opinions about it. That could lead to arguments and discussions, but different levels of calm. That's enough. And you recognize that because of different levels of calm, you can refine it. Practice can be refined. You could say in 4 levels or whatever. There's also mention of 8 levels, 9 levels of absorption. We don't get too complicated here. But then there's different opinions about what level of concentration, because right concentration is part of the Eightfold Path. So what degree of concentration is necessary for awakening? So quite a few teachers agree that, for the first level of awakening anyway, maybe only first level absorption is necessary. That's all you need, is first level. But for the higher stages, for the arahantship, you may have to go back to the cushion again and develop a bit more concentration. However, you're already primed, as it were. You already have a good experience of what it is. Just more and more refined levels of calm. And then we arrive at equanimity. It's the last of these 7 factors of awakening. And even though equanimity, many of us think equanimity is sort of, pretty commonplace. It's actually a very, very developed or advanced state in the Buddhist teachings. It's mentioned as the 4th of the 4 divine abidings, Brahma Vihara. It's the 4th one. There's metta, which is friendliness, then there's compassion, sympathetic joy, and then equanimity. So that's one way to develop it, if you like. First of all, you need to, you can say develop the other 3 of the divine abidings or Brahma Viharas, at least to some degree of friendliness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and then maybe equanimity. And this is you might recognize that in this, one is tuning in. To be friendly, one has to have something to be friendly to. Compassion is a bit more universal, having compassion for other people's suffering, or suffering in general. Sympathetic joy, it can be a little tricky one. Rejoicing in other people's well-being, even though you're having a hard time, but you rejoice in other people's well-being. Once you've tuned in on these different levels of our being, then perhaps you arrive at equanimity, even-mindedness. And I had experience myself early on in Thailand. I was meditating alone in the early years, basically, and I had many worrying thoughts, confusing thoughts. Should I stay? Should I go? Whatever. So I looked in this Visuddhimagga, this commentarial, this post-commentarial book written 1,000 years after the Buddha, but it's kind of a neat collection of the Buddha's teachings. Some of them not correct, but anyway. So one of the useful things of it was, it said, they have a list of the different disturbances of mind and the meditation theme you should use. So I looked in there and it said the antidote or the solution to worrying thoughts was equanimity. That's what I need, equanimity. Yeah, that's what I need. So I tried to develop equanimity. You sit there and no worries. Yeah. And I fell asleep. I didn't just fall asleep. It got worse and worse. It became unconsciousness. I just sat down and I was gone for an hour. And I woke up and where was I? What happened? Where did I sleepwalk? Did I fly? It got a bit worrying. It's supposed to be the antidote to worry, and I got a bit worried about it. Anyway, I had a chance to go to a meditation monastery near Bangkok, and then I asked the teacher. I said, I told him about this problem of falling asleep, and he said, it was a Vipassana center. See, he said, just be mindful of sleepiness. I said, well, isn't that the problem? How do you be mindful of sleepiness? But anyway, it had nothing to do for 3 months except watch sleepiness. So I just sat there and tried to watch the breathing, and then it would fade away and fall asleep. But after about a month or so, I noticed, there's something before sleepiness. It's a neutral feeling. Neutral feeling tone. Yeah. And the second month, I noticed something before neutral feeling tone. There's like a blankness of mind. And then I realized what I was doing. I wasn't developing equanimity. I was developing indifference. Totally the opposite of equanimity. Equanimity is an evenness of mind when you're tuned in to disturbance. But indifference is tuning out, turning off from disturbances. And so it seems like your mind is equanimous, but it's indifferent and it's blank. You have to turn off. And so it's a state of dullness or non-mindfulness, if you like. So increased illusion then. And the mind went blank and neutral feeling and then sleep. So I had to, stop that habit of just turning the mind off from things. And then after a little while, the worry came back. But at least it kept me awake. And then I had to deal with the worry with wisdom then, not just turning off from it. But it was a very, very subtle experience, Between indifference and equanimity can be very, very hard to tell apart. So some people, they try to develop equanimity, but as I mentioned, it's a very advanced state. You can't really develop equanimity directly. Either you do it through the 4 Brahma Viharas, or it's also equanimity is the main emotional tone of the 4th absorption. There's piti and sukha, and then after a while, even this joy and rapture, joy and happiness pass away, leaving only equanimity in the 4th absorption. Can you imagine equanimity being better than joy? Huh? Haven't got there yet. But a relative way to reflect upon equanimity, to perhaps experience equanimity, is reflect upon the principle of karma. All our intentional actions have a result. Doesn't matter, we're trying to do things, try to avoid suffering, but your intentional actions will give results, regardless of all your attempts to get away from it. So you just have to surrender to it. And in that, there is a certain, let the principle of karma take over. And there's a certain evenness in that, even-mindedness. Okay, it doesn't seem fair, especially when it affects me. But that's the way it is. It's the nature of things. So you have to develop a more equanimous, even-minded attitude. Praise and blame, the suffering, the pain, the happiness, and the unhappiness. Just part of the karma, the principle of karma. Then. So these 7 factors of awakening, as you see, if you read the other passages I suggested in Samyutta Nikaya, it was mentioned more in terms of dealing with hindrances, right? Directly with the hindrances. And we've covered the hindrances already, and I mentioned, I didn't mention too much about factors of awakening, but when you develop these factors, it's like we have extra tools on hand to deal with them. The different, like energy, for example. I didn't mention too much about energy this time because I mentioned it a lot last time with regard to dealing with sleepiness, lethargy and sleepiness, right? For those who weren't there, to shorten it, I would say one of the keys to understanding right energy is to be able to distinguish between willpower and life power. See, most people are only functioning on willpower, which is, the will is the ego. So it's a false energy. It'll keep you going for a while, but after a while it's going to dry up. Especially when you start to realize anatta. But if you recognize the difference between willpower and life power, we have a natural power in our life. What gets you up in the morning? Maybe it's your alarm clock, but just naturally waking up. I don't think we all need willpower to get up in the morning, do we? Maybe initially, but 3:30 or something. But after a while, that will dry up. And willpower is very contracting. It depends upon the ego and the will to get going. It's not relaxing. It's not tuned into life power. Actual life power is with us all the time. Not so dramatic, but it's in the background. What keeps you going? When I was in Thailand, even a couple of years ago, I stayed in a remote place up in the northeast. It's a national park, but near a village. So the villagers used to come in here once in a while, especially in the hot season, and burn off the grass, you see. Well, I was in the middle of the grass, So I had my cave there, so I had a little bit of investment. But it was a shame to burn down the forest, you see. So I spent many hours fighting fires. And sometimes I was quite far from my lodging. Fire spread further away. And way out there, I ran out of water, and but I had to put the fire out. I was totally exhausted. Sometimes I had to lie down every 5 minutes to get my energy back again. And nobody else knew I was there either. So if I passed out, that was it. That was ant food. A few times I was just so tired. My brain just stopped working, and I was just going on automatic. I had no more willpower left. But there was still something else there, some, I would say, life power. It wasn't very dramatic. I couldn't just jump up and I gotta get back to find some water or something. But I got up and I just had to drag myself to the next place, the next place, the next place. But there was this, it's like an instinct in a way, survival instinct maybe or something. But it's in the background all the time. But when mostly it's so not so obvious, you don't tune into it. The willpower is more dramatic. Yes, I want that. I'll get it. Yeah. But if you just say, okay, I want to get it, and your life power says, don't bother, it'll win out. What's really important, what's really useful. So if you can distinguish between willpower and life power, you might be able to recognize the benefits of what's right energy then. we're in this for the long-term perspective. I mean, maybe we hope we'll be enlightened today or tomorrow, but 46 years now. I don't want to disappoint you, but it's a little bit longer than maybe you think. So more useful to depend upon life, to recognize the benefits of life power then, rather than just the willpower then. The 7 factors of awakening, they are mentioned mostly in the context of dealing with the 5 hindrances, but as the name applies, factors of awakening. So they will lead to, to cultivate them. Ideally, they lead towards increased awakening then. And the Buddha emphasized the importance of development. These should be developed. Just like the hindrances are something to be released from, the hindrances, factors of awakening are to be developed. And sometimes, you just, by recognizing, for example, that tranquility is a factor of awakening. How many of us would recognize tranquility as a factor of awakening? Does our society recognize tranquility as a useful factor? Huh? No, you got to get out there and get going and do something and get some more money, makes it work harder. Tranquility, you're fired. Next time you're at your computer and you just be doing nothing, and your boss comes along and say, "I'm developing the tranquility factor of enlightenment." See what they say. Not necessary here. Get to work. Maybe your boss will understand that. She's been here already, her boss. So. But recognizing that is a factor of awakening now. And we recognize it in our life, we can try to cultivate it as a positive factor then. And not think it's we're being lazy or something. Because you have to distinguish between what is tranquility and what is lethargy. What is energy and what is restlessness? Well, we first of all be aware of what that is, what that quality is, and then what's present or not present. How does it arise? How to develop it now? And if we, occasionally we come across these different factors in our life, try and cultivate them more and more, they become part of our way of being then. So that our way of being becomes, mindful, reflecting on Dhamma, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, equanimity. Isn't that awakening? It's right there. 7 factors away. So, any questions? Ooh, yeah. Uh-oh. Okay.
Okay, so one of the things I noticed when I was reading the passages was there was this concept that Bhikkhu Bodhi actually mentions. The Pali term is Yoniso Manasikara, and it sounds a lot like sati. Can you, in practical terms, what's the difference between them? Because they sound kind of like the way you're describing careful attention sounded a lot like what I thought mindfulness to be. Mm-hmm. Is there a practical difference?
A subtle difference. I mean, attention, manasikara, is present in every state of mind. It's one of the universals. But then how you use it, carefully, thoroughly, or not so thoroughly. I would say that, like concentration is focused attention. Mindfulness, I would say, is something like educated or instructed attention. You bring your attention to body, feelings, states of mind. You bring your attention to the feelings arising, passing away. It's like it has a direction to it. And then it becomes, when you do that, then it becomes closer to wisdom, seeing more wisely or clearly. Then it becomes right attention. But initially, attention is not trained. It's just an ordinary, you could say a function of the mind. But through concentration, we train it to be focused, attention to be focused, mindfulness to be directed, educated about what to attend to. And then it slowly begins to, become directed or wise or educated. And it becomes thorough attention then. And there's different ways that this yoniso can be translated. It literally means, back to the source. So it can be thorough, very, very deep, penetrating, or it can be wise attention to. So they all kind of fit together when it is well trained with concentration and mindfulness. And
the mindfulness aspect is like, because sati is related to memory.
Yep.
Is that what you mean by the educated? Because you're sort of remembering what you're.
Yeah, initially you do, yeah. But if you train your attention to come back, you remember to go back to the breathing, back to the feeling tones.
Yeah.
You do that, it learns that lesson, and that's where it abides. But it takes a little bit of education, a bit of learning.
Yeah.
Most people's attention is not very well taught, well instructed.
I'd like to thank you very much for the theme of life power versus willpower. It's been very useful and instructive in my practice in the world, and had a good time. And I'd like to ask about I noticed that, continuing on the theme of Yoniso Manasikara, or wise attention, that it said that one of the things that we should pay wise attention to in developing concentration was the sign of serenity, or the sign of non-dispersal. So, and later on in the same Samyutta 46:28 penetration, it says sati is based upon seclusion, dispassion, cessation, maturing and release, which is vast, exalted, immeasurable, and without ill will. And it goes through all of the 7 factors. The sign of non-dispersal. It seems like it's almost present in all of them, because if you've got, say, mindfulness of your current state of mind, right, and it's based on seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, you're not going to be like overtaken. You're not going to be running off with the mind. It's going to be a calm, clear scene. A calm, clear scene. You're not going to be running off with the mind. So I just the question is what have you understood by this sign of sign of serenity and sign of non-dispersal? I'll give you an example. For the previous one, it said for Yoniso Manasikara, like wise attention for tranquility of the body, it says that we should develop tranquility in terms of the 3 mental states, which are feeling, perception, and the mental formations. And that, so in terms of wise attention, so I give an example of non-wise attention here would be if there's the mind state's coming up, it's like, oh, that's a bad mind state, go away, bad mind state. Or like, oh, I need to be concentrated. Like, for instance, when you're talking about focusing on the breath, and the irony here is, of course, this is full of dispersal. But when you're talking about focusing on the breath and coming back to the breath again and again and again, there's an element in which one could be doing that unwisely. So one is forcing oneself to come back to the breath, like, I've got to be back at the breath, come back to the breath, go back to the breath. And so this is likely to lead to the opposite of concentration. So it's not necessarily that there's an object there. So I'm just curious, that concentration in its term, in how it matures in this release, the muti, is that maturing and release? Is that something that happens at one time, or is it something that happens over a lifetime, or is it
Both.
both?
Depends on the person. It's like just planting a seed. It's, the seed. When does the seed become a tree? It's a little sprout. It's a sapling. When's it a tree? So the first experience, the first experience of a little sprout. Okay, it's on its way. Keep cultivating it, watering it, looking after it, then it'll mature and release eventually. But with some people, they don't keep cultivating it. You see, they see the little sprout come up and okay, that's good enough, and they walk away, and it's eaten by the iguanas or something.
Running around with a little sprout.
Yeah. I've got it. Yeah, I made it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it's maturing. So it has to. It's talking about something maturing. So it needs to be cultivated and continued, and takes a little bit of continuity in the practice. Then, so you know what the direction is now to keep up with it. You see.
Is this the aspect of when we chant about the Dhamma? Apparent here and now, timeless, encouraging investigation, leading inwards to be experienced individually by the wise. This is something which is like, it's paradoxical, because obviously, like everywhere it's talked about, it's talked also about in terms of a path and an attribute that somebody has.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe it's Manasakara, like little seeds.
Yep. I mean, it needs to be, like I say, the attention needs to be trained. Otherwise, attention is like it's free floating. It's just like an untrained child. Or an animal or something. And it's not following a helpful path. So it's okay by itself, but doesn't lead to awakening. Can lead the other way around. You see, to confusion, increased greed, hatred, and delusion, rather than decreased. So that's what the Buddha talked about, training, the path of training. Yeah. So and then these factors of awakening, there's helpful tools to use. You see. And each person, maybe they have their own preference or their own strength, but also some weaknesses. Some people may be very good at concentration, but mindfulness is not so great. You see. So I mean, maybe they think, I'm really good at meditation, concentration, so I've made it. I'm a great yogi, But I've seen people who have that, who have an ability for concentration. 20 years later, the same problems in their life, no wisdom. So, I mean, you can say, well, okay, they got 20 years of concentration practice, but where's the wisdom? You forgot something. There's something missing here. You forgot 4 of the 7 factors of awakening. Or no joy or something, They're still slogging away, and waiting for the cessation of suffering, and they're still suffering. The cessation of suffering. So just having that as a reflection, 7 factors. I mean, there's 3 active ones, 3 passive ones, and then there's mindfulness to watch over. So you can get a good balance in the practice. Some people are very exuberant. Some people are very tranquil about it, very easygoing about it. But you got to balance the active and the passive, the middle way.
Thank you. My question would be really
I was wondering, you mentioned that when the bliss is that in the concentration states, usually it's encouraged to pour the piti into the whole body of kaya. I was wondering, is that usually interpreted as the physical body, or is that seen as a conceptual, like a thought, but like a Dhammakaya?
It can be both.
What's your personal?
Yeah. Well, the body, the physical body is more obvious, and then it overflows, and when the physical body is joyful, then becomes you can say an emotion, state of mind. Where do the two, join or meet or differentiate or whatever. It's just a pure state of ecstasy.
I guess that's what I was wondering about, because it seems like a Visuddhimagga approach. There is no body in the absorptions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bit extreme, I think. Yeah. Not a Visuddhimagga fan, but but don't quote me or don't argue with me.
Do you feel like there are some add-ons for the body?
Well, I will. Maybe I have to delete this. But there is some. Let's see. There was some discussion, especially in Thailand. They're not so devoted to Buddhaghosa in Thailand, because he was in Sri Lanka, see. But in Thailand, they're a bit distant from him, see. So there is sometimes criticism of him that he was a pseudo Brahmin, you see. He mixed a bit of Brahmanism into it, you see. So these samadhi states were more Brahmanic than they were Buddhist, you know. So I mean, it kind of makes sense in a way. But
Ajahn, it's been said in Sri Lanka as well.
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not just a cultural thing. See,
But he was Indian, though, right?
yeah.
Sorry?
He was Indian.
Yeah.
Because in Sri Lanka now, monks are very openly saying it.
Oh, gee.
It started the last 10 years.
Yeah. Critical of before the Visuddhimagga. It was previously the Visuddhimagga was like the word of the Buddha almost. You know, I mean, it was more accessible, I think, than the Pali Canon to a lot of people. Like the Pali Canon's only been translated into Thai language, and even that's not vernacular Thai. The last 20 years, 30 years. Yeah, actually, Buddhadasa was quite radical to translate the chanting from Pali into Thai. People didn't know what they were saying. They're chanting this Pali words, and most of them didn't know what they're saying until he got them to translate it into Thai. And then they began to realize what they're saying. So we're very fortunate in English, because it's been available in English for 130 years or something. But been available but even translation to Thai is very high soul, very, very kind of almost academic language. It's not the vernacular of everyday people, but in English it's much more ordinary English. Still a little bit high soul. But it was somebody translated some of the scriptures in I think it was the Publication Society. They have the Buddha Speaks Here and Now or something. The Buddha was walking along the street one day and he met this guy, and it was a bit hard to listen, hard to read, but he's trying to make it more accessible to the average person, you see. But it does maybe tend to make it a little bit too pedestrian or something, or too secular maybe. But he had a good idea, but maybe the time hasn't come yet. So it's after 3 o'clock now, and I know you're going to have a long evening tonight, is it? Or a long day? Yeah. So what, 5 o'clock tomorrow morning or something? Huh? 6 o'clock tomorrow morning?
6 to 5.
Huh?
6 to 5.
6 to 5. Well, so 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock tonight till 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. Yeah.
Is it 6 or 5?
Just walking and sitting.
Okay, yeah. But
And then 7.
7 the chanting starts. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'll will for tonight.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.